Hello everyone, my name is Emily, and today I want to talk to you about the Declaration of Independence, specifically its unique use of emotional appeal. The Declaration is a pretty famous document. Students in America can recognize the names and quote its highlights. However, we might miss the rhetoric in the document itself that makes it truly historic. To explain the context of this document, the Declaration of Independence was written in 1776 by Thomas Jefferson to the King of England. It was published and distributed in the colonies as well. According to archive.gov, the colonies were experiencing several abuses from the king, including high taxes, losing trade opportunities, and having to house soldiers. The colonies wanted independence to end these abuses. Revolution leaders started publishing material to motivate separation from the king. One of these leaders was Thomas Jefferson, who was called on to craft a letter of independence to the king on behalf of the people. Archive.gov explains that Jefferson went through several drafts in the creation of this piece, using feedback to make it more concise because it had to be short. The Declaration is a well-recognized and often quoted document. Although we associate the Declaration of Independence with the credibility of the Founding Fathers' names, its strengths lie in the careful diction of the piece to convey universal values with professionalism and authority. These strengths would not exist without drafting and feedback from Jefferson's peers. To begin, the highlight of the Declaration is its smart use of universal values. You can see in this paragraph of the Declaration that Jefferson references truth, equality, rights, happiness, consent, safety, and even religion and government. By referencing these abstract values, Jefferson not only rallies support from the colonies, but also creates something difficult for the king to argue against. Universal values are just that, universal. If everyone is in agreement that happiness, truth, and safety are basic needs, there is a stronger bond among people built on emotion. How could the king disagree or fight back against this? The heavy use of universal values is a strategic way of generating emotion without delving into sounding too unhinged or dramatic. Something to note here as well is the use of capital letters. According to Grammarly, an expert source in all things grammar, words are typically capitalized to signal proper nouns or official titles like names, countries, or books. Jefferson, though, chooses to capitalize common nouns like safety and happiness. By capitalizing common nouns, he forces the reader to see them as proper and official. This effectively mixes emotion with credibility. These emotional words are given validity when capitalized, supporting Jefferson's argument that these concepts are unalienable and self-evident. Another use of emotion that is mixed with another appeal is when Jefferson lists the colony's grievances. Two things stand out here: repetition and verb choice. The repetition helps the reader know what to expect, since every statement will start in a similar way. The repetition also makes it feel heavier, as the reader starts to realize the quantity of concerns. For verbs, they are emotionally charged, but also direct and appropriate. For example, refused accurately describes how certain actions have not occurred, but it also casts the king as someone who is intentionally ignoring and neglecting the colonies. According to a Time article about the American Revolution, British people were divided about the outbreak of war with what was then their colony, over how bad it was, whose fault it was, and what to do about it. Jefferson's language helps clarify who to blame. The negative connotation plus repetition successfully teaches colonists and British citizens to see the king as the bad guy, even if they might not have felt that way before. Even though I have pointed out lots of emotion, this appeal is actually a revised version of what Jefferson originally wanted to say. I found Jefferson's drafts on ushistory.org. On this slide, you can see his first draft on the left and his final draft on the right. The final draft is after feedback from other leaders like Madison. I highlighted the differences for you in red. You can see how Jefferson reworded and rephrased things to be less emotional. A specific example is when reject and renounce is replaced with solemnly publish and declare. For me, reject and renounce sounds like throwing a temper tantrum. Rejection just conveys a lot of pain and hurt. A lot of pain and hurt. Publish and declare, though, is much more professional and reserved. Adding solemnly conveys a more serious and composed tone. Another example of this shift to something more poised is from "we utterly dissolve all political connection" to "they are all absolved, all connection ought to be totally dissolved." The use of "we" and "utterly dissolve" groups everyone together as some sort of victim who feel a great personal offense has occurred. Moving to "they" steps away from that victimization, and then using "ought to be totally dissolved" makes it the king's responsibility to resolve the conflict. Jefferson really shows how he stepped away from expressing too much emotion. If Jefferson had been too emotional like his first draft, he could have been dismissed by both the king and the colonists. Being more subtle with emotion and shifting blame to the king is a more effective strategy. Looking through the draft again, you can notice that Jefferson previously didn't capitalize those universal values. His list of grievances had the same verbs, but language moved away from "are" and "we" and towards "they." This means Jefferson valued the feedback and wanted to put it in the final draft. The feedback Jefferson received about his wording helped create a document that affirmed their intent to separate with a sense of professionalism, authority, and universal appeal, rather than too much emotion. Yes, the signatures at the bottom of the Declaration are powerful, and today we recognize those names as important. However, the well-crafted language of the document is what really seals the deal and achieves Jefferson's purpose. This language couldn't have been achieved if it wasn't for drafting and feedback. Thank you for listening. Here is a works cited in case you want to reference anything I mentioned in the video.